So ended a week in which Boris Johnson, having flown to Brussels to try and sprinkle a little personal magic into this process, was rebuffed by the EU. By this morning, as hopes of a trade deal apparently faded, he was giving this assessment.
There's a way to go. We're hopeful that progress can be made, but I've got to tell you that from where I stand now, here in Blythe, it's looking, very, very likely that we'll have to go for a solution that I think would be, wonderful for the UK. We'd be able to do exactly what we want from January the 1st. Obviously, it would be different from what we'd set out to achieve, but I've no doubt that this country can get ready.
To many Brexiteers steeped in the idea that the EU only talks seriously at the 11th hour, the idea of a dash to Brussels by Boris Johnson seemed to make sense, and it offered the chance to repeat his achievement of last year in improving the withdrawal agreement. But the EU was determined to deny him access to national leaders and not to concede on any point of substance.
This morning, we learned that on Monday, President Macron and Chancellor Merkel both refused requests from Number 10 for consultations by phone, routing Mr Johnson back to the EU's top official, Ursula von der Leyen. With the attempt to get political intervention from France or Germany thwarted, the PM's Wednesday visit to Brussels was simply a moment in which both sides restated their positions. And the EU was determined to send him packing before its leaders arrived for their summit yesterday. If he'd ever hoped to make his case to them in person, it was not to be.
There was some concern about Boris Johnson having a range of bilaterals with different leaders right at the end of the negotiation. This notion of unity has been very, very important. And of course, different member states are affected differently by a deal and no deal. So the risk that some kinks in that narrative around unity would appear at the last moment, I think, was something of a concern. So better if Boris is not there, and if he is, has to work through European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen.
At the leaders' dinner last night, Ms von der Leyen's report on the British talks lasted only 10 minutes. Briefing that out looks like a deliberate snub. Undaunted, Boris Johnson offered to fly to have face-to-face talks with EU leaders in order to find a solution.
We've got to keep going, and we'll go the extra mile, and we will, and I will go to Brussels, I'll go to Paris, I'll go to Berlin or wherever to try to get this home and get to a deal.
But this too was swiftly rejected.
I would invite him to stay in London and work at it. He must help his team to come to an agreement with the European team.
By this morning, Ursula von der Leyen was suggesting that the EU would make a unilateral assessment on Sunday as to whether there's any point having further talks.
We will decide on Sunday whether we have the conditions for an agreement or not.
The EU's rebuff this week, essentially take it or leave it, was rather reminiscent of the Greek debt crisis and the treatment meted out to that country's leaders. Will it leave Boris Johnson so humiliated that he can only choose no deal? Well, the EU did leave the door slightly ajar.
In today's post-summit briefing, Ursula von der Leyen did at least suggest that the level playing field provisions at the heart of the remaining disagreement might be less onerous than imagined.
But this is not to say that we would require the UK to follow us every time we decide to raise our level of ambition, for example, in the environmental field. They would remain free, sovereign, if you wish, to decide what they want to do.
So are the leaders masking a readiness to compromise at this late stage? And could they pile pressure on Boris Johnson by declaring this weekend that the talks are over to see if that raises the economic cost to the UK? We'll know more on Sunday evening.